Good morning, you guys. It's Tuesday. It's late. It's 9-ish. I'm Tricia Turner. This is Rise and Thrive. So if you've been paying attention to our story, my story, you know that I've had a podcast running for over 3 years now. Actually started it right before COVID, and it was called Anything But Average. And the purpose of the podcast was to bring you positivity and ways to improve your life, your business, and help you grow. And every week, it's a weekly podcast. I bring you somebody that is someone that is inspirational or someone you can learn from and someone we can share their story. Well, that podcast transformed into another one, and we went on another network, and it became Walk Away Wealthy, wealthy in knowledge, wisdom, all these things, right? And that one ran for until the end of December 2023. And I wanted to take a break. I needed to find more of a purpose for the podcast, and what did I really want to go deep about? So I took about a 6-month break and then relaunched under Rise and Thrive. And that is the name of the podcast now. It is still a weekly podcast. So in the 3+ years, I've probably only missed a few episodes. And typically I have it scheduled where we have a guest every week. And Rise and Thrive is based on my four principles that are most important in my life, which are faith, family, finances, and fitness, of course, because for me, I'm not anywhere without God and my faith. My family is my second most important thing in my whole life. And you got to have your finances right? Because if you're broke, you can't take care of your family, and you cannot tithe, and you cannot go change the world. And I've always worked out. So that's extremely important to me. I think everyone should be working out. If you don't work out, I don't understand why. And so Rise and Thrive is coming to you every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time, live. Usually I have a guest on. Well, I do. I have a guest today. But if you saw like the ads running, showing you who was the guest today and what we were talking about, it was my dear friend, Lacey Lugo. Well, that goofball realized that she was actually on a plane this morning when we were supposed to be airing this. Therefore, I didn't have much time, not only to change who was supposed to be the guest on the thing, but to get anyone on. And then God spoke to me this morning and was like, you know what? Like, let's talk about faith a little bit. Well, Justin, this is my son, Justin. A lot of you know that. But if you don't, this is Justin. And Justin is the true testimony of faith because, and it's ironic how this worked out because Justin's birthday is, when's your birthday, Justin?
Fun Friday.
Fun Friday. Justin's birthday is Fun Friday. And Justin, how old are you going to be?
24.
He's going to be 24, you guys. So let me tell you a little bit about faith. So in Justin's time here on this earth, number one, he was not expected to live past 4. Here he is now 20 years later, still here. When Justin was born, he was born with Down syndrome and autism and lots of medical conditions, things we didn't even know about when he was born. His intestines weren't attached. His heart was bad, you name it. And he was like challenged with it medically. So in his first 2 weeks here on this earth, he went into NICU. He was not expected to survive. And they were trying to get his intestines attached. He was, it was Christmas Eve. So that would have been Christmas Eve 2000, because that's when he was born. He was born in the year 2000. So it was Christmas Eve. We went into the NICU to see him, and the doctors came up to me and they said, you know, your son is not doing well. They had already done one surgery to connect his intestines, and the surgery was a success, but he had not come out of it. He had not regained like consciousness and awakeness. So they had feeding tubes in him. They had tubes all over the place to keep him alive. So it was Christmas Eve. Went in to see him before we went to church. And at that time we were attending Second Baptist on Voss, and went in to see Justin before the Christmas Eve service. And we had Joshua already, and Joshua was 3. And so the nurse and the doctors came up to me and they're like, we need you to sign these consent forms. Your son is just not recovering, and we're going to have to go back into the OR tonight because we've now used all the veins available left in his body. And now we have to put a port in his head, and that has to be done in the OR. And that's our only shot at Justin, like, surviving this and recovering from the surgery. And so I'm like devastated, crying, like this can't be right. This is not happening. And so we sign the consent forms. We go, and at the time when I left Justin, I'm going to try to get to this without getting like emotional. So at the time when I left Justin there, he had tubes like everywhere. Hold on. He's so awesome. So we go to Second Baptist for the Christmas Eve service, and I put in this long prayer request. I write out this long prayer request that my son is not supposed to make it through the night, and like for them to please pray for him that he makes it through the night. So next morning rolls around, Santa had come for Joshua. And so we go through the motions and let Joshua have Christmas for a few minutes. And we're like, we have to get down to the hospital and check on Justin because we hadn't heard anything, right? So we get down to the NICU in the morning, and I walk in. So they make you put on these hazmat suits, right? So I put on my hazmat suit, walk into where I had left Justin, which was in an incubator. And when I had left him the night before, he was on his back with his arms just like lifeless, like completely lifeless. And when I went into where he was laying the night before, he was still there. And so I bent down to kiss him. And as I'm bending down to kiss him, I realize that there's no tubes on his body. There's just like a breathing tube, but there's no port in his head. There's like nothing. And his cheeks are rosy, and he has life. And as I'm coming up from kissing him, the nurse is coming towards me, and I'm just looking at her like, what is going on? And I said, like, what is going on? Like, you said he was going into the OR last night. Like, there's no port in his head. Like, all the tubes are gone. Like, what happened here? Like, what happened last night? Right. And I'm crying. And she starts crying. And she said, we don't know. Justin came out of it this morning about 8 o'clock, and we had gotten there about 9:30. She said, Justin came out of it this morning about 8 o'clock and woke up. She said, but your pastor was here during the night praying over him. And she just starts bawling. And I start bawling. Justin came home from the NICU after that incident, probably two weeks later. I think it was about 2 weeks later. He came home. That wasn't the end of our battles, but that was his first act. That was God's first act of grace and mercy. And then there was several, like, I could go on and on about testimonials about Justin. I want to give you like the main ones that if you're out there and you're struggling with anything, there is a God, and he is real, and he hears our prayers and he answers them. You just have to be plugged in and you have to believe. There was another incident when Justin was 3 or 2, somewhere in there. No, he was 3. We were in Colorado. We went on top of Pikes Peak Mountain, not knowing that Justin had lung disease. And Justin lost consciousness on top of the mountain. Literally, he was in his stroller, and he put his head down. And I thought he was just taking a nap because he would tire easily, because we knew he had a bad heart. He also had open heart surgery when he was 7 months old, and again survived being cut wide open. He was in the NICU again after open heart surgery, survived that one. So after the open heart surgery at 7 months old, and there were several other instances in between that time before that, what happened at Pikes Peak, and he lost consciousness, and he was laying with his head down on the stroller, and his lips started turning blue because we just thought he was taking a nap, and he was a little purple-ish, but it was freezing at the top of the freaking mountain, and it was wintertime. And so, but then his lips started turning blue, and I started shaking him. I'm like, Justin, and he wasn't breathing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so granted, we're on the top of Pikes Peak Mountain with my then husband. And I'm like, we have to get off this freaking mountain, like right now, and we have to get Justin to help. If you've never driven on Pikes Peak Mountain, and this is again, only by the grace of God, we all should have died that day. The road to get up to the top of the mountain is like the skinniest, narrowest, most terrifying road in the whole freaking world that I've been on anyway. And so we drove to the top of it, right? And we had a rental car. So I'm like, we have to get Justin off this mountain like now. We were in like a minivan. And so I get in the back of the minivan with Justin. I have Justin in my arms, and he is again lifeless. He's not breathing. He's purple. His lips are turning blue. And so I open the window, the back window, and my then husband starts heading down the mountain on this winding road. I don't know how I do know how, like only by the grace of God, we should have flown off that mountain at the rate of speed that we were going down that mountain. And I had Justin's head to where we were trying to get air in him so he would start breathing again. Halfway down the mountain, and I can't even imagine how long he was unconscious, because we thought he was taking a nap, right? And so halfway down the mountain, he came to. By the time we got all the way down the mountain, we pulled off to like this little rest area, and again, got Justin in my arms, crying, freaking out. Justin comes to, and he seems fine, and everything is okay. Fast forward, we come back to Houston. I call freaking Texas Children's, because they have been involved in his life since day one. He had lived at the Texas Children's Hospital his first 2 years. We were there constantly. So I call, and I'm like, Justin just almost died on the top of Pikes Peak Mountain. What the hell? I need to come in like now. And so I go in to his pulmonologist, and they do a lung biopsy, and he's in the OR for like 5.5 hours. And so comes out of the OR, doctor sits me down. He's like, all right, well, apparently we definitely can't be sugarcoating things with you. For one, don't ever go on Pikes Peak Mountain with Justin again. Don't ever go on an airplane with Justin. Don't ever take Justin into a high altitude area. Justin has to stay in the southern region because he has lung disease. And basically his lungs are full. They're at that time, they were at about 50% capacity. So his lungs were full, 50% of what they described as concrete cysts. And they were multiplying. So kind of like little balloons that were just growing and spreading. And they said, they described it as concrete. And the Dr. Nocturne was his surgeon. He said, I could only get in one of his lungs. He said, and it took that long to get through the veins and everything. There's so many cysts in there, and I didn't want to rupture any of them. He said, but what you're dealing with here is a lung disease, and it's very aggressive, and Justin is likely not going to make it until 4. They said that these cysts would keep multiplying and he would expire. He would come to a point where his lungs were full and he would no longer be able to breathe naturally. And so they said, you can do a do not resuscitate order, because the only way to survive that would be to put in breathing tubes, and he would have to live in the hospital on tubes forever until you decided that you didn't want him to live on tubes anymore. And I was like, we're not doing that. No freaking way. Am I going to have my family subjected to us living in a hospital? And that's not anyone's way of life. Anyway, no one in my family is going to live in a hospital on tubes. Never. And so I said, again, and I say this like without crying right now, but this was all very devastating. All of it. Years of devastation. And I said, I'm going to sign the DNR, and when God determines that it's time for Justin to go home, then he will. And I will have to make peace with it. And that was like some very hard times, like, because you're thinking, well, he's 3, right? And you're talking about only 4. And then you're looking at like caskets for kids and horrible things that parents should never look at. Well, fast forward. 4, he turns 4, and he's still here. And we're in the pulmonology department every 3 months, because they're monitoring these cysts and how fast they're growing. So his lungs got to 75% full. Well, the body can function off of only 25% lung capacity. By the grace of God, the cysts in Justin's lungs stopped growing, and they stopped multiplying when his lungs reached 75%. And the doctors were like, he's a case study at Texas Children's, just so you know. Like, there's so many things that have blown their mind. So then when he passed 4, right, they're like, okay, well, and he was doing okay. You know, he was still sickly, but he wasn't growing. So he reached a certain point where he didn't grow for like 5 years. And he was just this little bitty thing, like a 4-year-old size forever. He was 9 and he was like a 4-year-old. And they said, okay, well, maybe, they added 5 more years. Maybe once they realized and assumed that the lungs had, they called it kind of remission, that these cysts had stopped growing and stopped multiplying, they said, well, he's functioning on 25% lung capacity. Like, that's not sustainable for long periods of time. And you're dealing with someone that has heart issues. We've already repaired his heart, but his heart's not strong. So they were like, maybe he'll make it to 9, right? So they're like, just know this, every day is a gift, and just live every day as if it was going to be your last. Enjoy every minute you have with him. And I'm like, okay. So Justin went to school. He always went to school, and he never did homework. Like, they would try to send homework home, and I'd be like, we don't do homework in this house. And because, for number one, it's me doing Justin's homework. Justin's smart as crap, but reading and writing is a challenge, right? And so don't be sending home all this homework that Justin doesn't want to do. And I'm not going to sit here and try to do it with him because I'm going to enjoy every day with him. And we don't enjoy homework. So every year at school, it would be a battle in the beginning of the year with his teachers, because they would send stuff home. They're like, we need this back by this. I'd be like, yeah, that's not happening. And they would try to like bark orders. And I'm like, you can dictate orders all you want. We don't do homework. Period. I'm going to raise Justin the rest of his life. He'll always be with me, and we don't do homework. Right, Justin? And so we never did homework. And so, high five to no homework. So 9 rolls around, and he passes 9 years old, right? So we're still in and out of the hospital with other surgeries and other complications, right? But he's maintaining. Well, then they're like, okay, well, we've passed the 9 mark, right? And they're like, he most certainly will never make it to be a teenager. That was their last prediction. Well, he did. So then when he became a teenager, they're like, kind of threw their hands up in the air, and they're like, okay, clearly we don't know. And this is something that's out of our control, because he's only here by the grace of God. Now, I've maintained that, and I didn't share Justin's testimony for years because it was too painful. Like, it was hard to even talk about it without crying, because it's so many years of pain when you watch your child suffering and you think you're going to lose them. And Justin's as sweet as can be. And he went through the first 10 years of his life being tube fed. So he had a feeding tube right here in his stomach, and he couldn't eat or drink anything by mouth. So he was only kept alive by me. I was the nurse for the first 10 years of his life, keeping him alive with Pediasure. And that's a whole nother story. And I used to pray, like, I didn't want Justin to go to heaven without learning to taste like pizza and ice cream and all the things that are bad for you but taste so good. And I used to just ask God, like, please don't take him. I never wanted a tube fed child. I had this big thing about, I don't want that. I want him to be as normal as God made him. We're not supposed to have tubes, right? So I was very resistant against this tube. And it was just, people looked at you and you were feed. It just was not a pleasant experience. So I used to pray, like, God, like, let him learn to eat by mouth so that he can get rid of this thing, and he's not going to heaven with a feeding tube. That's not what you promised. That's not what you gave to me. Well, all of a sudden, when he was about 10, after he's, was going to be like, when they said, oh, well, he'll never make it to be a teenager. It was probably when he was like 10 and a half, he started eating by mouth and ice cream, all the things that I had prayed about. He used to eat like half a gallon of ice cream, sometimes in a sitting. It was insane, just vanilla. Do you remember eating ice cream? It was crazy. Now, because he had been tube fed for all those years, he doesn't have jaw strength to bite into like a sandwich or pizza or anything like that. Everything has to be on a spoon or fork and soft, because of his teeth, for one, from not having food in his mouth for 10 years, and then not having the jaw strength, and then just so many issues with him. So Justin is he's on a very regimented diet. Now fast forward all these years, we removed his tube when he was almost 12, because they wouldn't take it out, because they were like, once you take it out, it will close up, and it's a pain to get it back in. And I was like, no, it's never going back in. Like, if he eats, when he eats my mouth, that freaking thing is never going back in. So I said, if you don't take it out, I'll take it out, because we're not using that as a crutch, not ever. Like, I will fight through this. I will get Justin to eat my mouth. I will get him to be, and they were like, you won't be able to get him to eat enough to sustain him, to survive eating food by mouth. And I was like, oh, you freaking watch me. I used to fight those doctors and those nutritionists like there's no tomorrow. Like, they did not like me. And anyone that has seen me with Justin knows, like, I will kick your ass if you try to like dictate and bark orders about how I'm going to handle Justin. Clearly I've done something right, because I'm just leaning on God's wisdom here and mercy and grace. And so got Justin eating enough by mouth where they knew if they didn't take that tube out, I was going to take it out, because I knew how, because I had to put it in by myself many times because it had popped out. And so I got them to take it out when he was almost 12. And by the grace of God, again, never put back in. He is strong. Show me your muscles. He's ripped, y'all. He's strong as crap. Like, he arm wrestles everyone and wins. I arm wrestle him and he beats me, and I'm strong as crap. And I try, like, I can try. I used to fake it and let him win, but he sincerely beats me now because he's strong as crap. He can do push-ups until the end of the day, like all freaking day long, and pull-ups. It's crazy. And his diet. So just so y'all know what he eats. So his diet is the same thing every single day. He drinks like 3 protein shakes a day. You like protein shakes? He loves them. He's obsessed with them. He eats oatmeal every morning, like 5 packets of oatmeal, which is a lot. He then eats lunch and consists of like pasta of some sort, and dinner is the same pasta of some sort usually. And he's thriving, y'all. And so I will tell you that when he does good, when he's doing really well medically, because now they're just like, we have no idea when and how long Justin's here. And I was like, well, nope, none of us do. Because you know what? I could walk out these steps today and get freaking struck by lightning or run over by a bus, and I could be gone. So he's the same as all of us. None of us are promised a tomorrow, right? One final testimony about Justin. A year ago was our last brink with death with Justin. Knocking on wood there. We ended up in the Methodist hospital last November. Justin was not doing well. He has lung disease still. He coughs a lot. His heart's not great. And they're just issues that we deal with. And that's his life. And so he was coughing, and he'd gotten sick, and he was coughing like profusely and just couldn't stop coughing. He didn't get better from like the flu or whatever the heck it was. And so my other kids called me. They were at home with him, and they're like, you got to come home right now. You got to get Justin to the ER. Like, he's holding his chest saying he can't breathe, and he's coughing nonstop. And so I race home, like 10 minutes. Our office is like 10 minutes from our house. So I race home. He's on the couch. He's not doing well. Boom, ER, head to the ER, get in Methodist. Within minutes, they have him, and I'm telling them he needs Lasix. There's fluid on his heart. There's fluid in his lungs. I can hear it in his cough. Long story short, they admit us because they do all kinds of tests that night in the ER. They get Lasix in him immediately because he was so bad. He couldn't stop coughing at all. He was drowning in his own fluid on his heart and lungs. I could hear it, and it was worsening by like the hour. And I'm frantic. I'm like, he needs Lasix in him now. Like, I know what's going on. You have to get this in him because he's not going to come out of this. Like, I'm watching him go down right here. And so they do all these tests. They get Lasix in him to get him stable. And then they admit us. So we were at Methodist for the weekend, which if you guys were following our story, you know, that's when my car got stolen from the hospital there. They tell us that while we're there, when we leave, that Justin's in heart failure. Because he was in heart failure as a baby. He went into heart failure at 5 months old. That's when he had to have open heart surgery, and they repaired his heart. So they tell me Justin's back in congestive heart failure. And his lungs are basically, his heart and his lungs are fighting against each other. And that's why there's fluid in both. And so they put another timeline in place. They're like, and Justin laid in that hospital bed. We weren't sure that he was going to wake up out of it. And if y'all followed our story, I posted pictures because I asked for prayers. I asked for prayers that Justin would wake up asked for prayers that Justin would come out of it and that we would be able to come home and resume whatever kind of normal life we could have. And he did the next day at Methodist. He came out of it. Do you remember being at the hospital? Do you remember waking up? It's scary, huh? But you're strong, aren't you? Yes. Want to hear this? So here's the testimony to that one. Not only did he wake up and we got to leave, we came out and my car had been stolen. So that was fun. Not. They wanted me to do a follow-up appointment at the hospital to talk about a plan, like how are we going to keep Justin comfortable, is what they said. And for any of you who've had terminal people, you know what that means. And I'm like, that's like, I'm not like ready to have this conversation. We're not doing that right now. Like, I'm not going to believe that that's what we're doing right now. And the doctors were like, that's where you are. Like, there isn't anything left. You've already been given like all this time that he didn't have anyway. Like, these were all gifts, right? You knew that it was kind of one of those conversations where you knew this day was coming and that's where you are now. And I'm like, I'm not okay with that. That was at the end of November of last year, like right around, because we were in the hospital November 3rd. So our follow-up was right around Thanksgiving time. Well, I'm going to get a second opinion, right? So I make another appointment with another heart and lung specialist at a different hospital. And that was in January of this year. So between Thanksgiving to our next appointment in January of this year, we go into the appointment and the doctor comes into the room and he's never met Justin before, but he's seen all the results. He saw the diagnosis that Justin's in heart failure and he saw the prognosis, right? He comes in and he sits down and he's looking at Justin and he starts talking to me and he said, he has this like bewildered look on his face. And he said, I don't really know what to tell you and how to tell you this. And I'm thinking like, holy crap, what is he about to tell me? Like, I already got dealt this negative blow at Thanksgiving, right? And he said, the diagnosis, like, your son's not in heart failure. And because they had repeated the test that morning. So they had gotten the test. They'd gotten Justin's results from the November 3rd admission into the hospital. They had gotten the test results from the doctor we went to around Thanksgiving. But then they administered their own test results that morning, January. So like 6 weeks apart. And he said, your son's not in heart failure. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, what? And he says, Justin's not in heart failure. And I said, are you sure? And he said, I'm 1000% sure. He said, I've never seen anything like this because I have the test results and I have the labs and I have the x-rays and I have the CAT scans. I have all of it that show his heart. And when you guys were in the hospital in November, like, he almost died. And I was like, he did. And he said, but the test that I did today, his heart is okay. He said, it's not great, but it's okay. He's not in heart failure. And his lungs are like they have been. Like, there's not fluid in his lungs right now. And the heart and the lungs, they're working together right now. So they're not fighting against each other. I don't know what to tell you. He goes, because this is unheard of. He said, I'm going to do one more test. I'm going to do blood work to confirm what these tests are showing. And he said, and if you don't hear from me, that means it confirmed it. He said, if some reason the blood work comes back and I'm wrong and he is actually in heart failure, well, we're going to have to redo all of this and rethink it all. But I'm going to tell you that I'm pretty certain the blood results are going to come back confirming that he's not in heart failure. And so they did. That was January of this year. I left the hospital that day and I was like, I called my other kids who were thinking like devastating, right? And I go, well, God has done it again. God has spared Justin again. And it's the craziest thing because you don't know what, like, someone's going to deliver a blow to you, but who has the final say? Not those test results, not those lab results, not your x-ray, not anything. God has the final say in everything that we do. And it's crazy that Lacey couldn't get on this podcast today, God, and that she didn't even realize it until last night. She's like, oh, holy crap, I'm so sorry. And I was thinking about this morning, I'm like, Justin's birthday is Friday, Fun Friday. He's going to celebrate another year here with us. What are we doing for your birthday?
Bowling.
We're going bowling. It's like Groundhog Day. He goes bowling every year at Times Square for his birthday. Who's coming to your party?
Marina.
Who's Marina?
My wife.
It's his wife. And he and Marina have been together since middle school. Do you love Marina?
I do.
Isn't that cute? They were in life skills all through Wood Creek and Tompkins, and they are best friends. And now they go to the Ark of Katie together. And who else is coming?
Alice.
Alex is coming, and he's been friends with Alex since middle school. Who else?
Abby.
Abby. He's known Abby since Tompkins. Who else?
Hope.
Hope, also from Tompkins. Who else?
Nathan.
Who?
Nathan.
Nathan?
Yes.
Nathan is coming. Who else?
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah.
Aren't you forgetting one person?
That's it.
Who's your best friend?
You.
Oh, that was super sweet. I am your best friend. Thank you. But who's your other best friend? You have another best friend. You're forgetting someone.
Alice.
No, this is your best friend.
I don't know. Zachary.
Zachary is his best friend in the whole wide world. I'm surprised you forgot him. Zachary doesn't live close by anymore, so I'm trying to get him here for Saturday. We're working on that. But this is something that we do every year with Justin. We celebrate because God has the final say. So this podcast is on faith, family, finances, and fitness. And this is very fitting today because no matter what's coming against you, Justin's faced every battle out there. More stories than I can even tell you. That's just the top of them. There are so many other stories in having Justin in my life where I've seen God's grace and mercy and turn things around when I didn't think there was a way and I didn't see a way. And God has stopped me from doing things that I shouldn't have done. And he's given us hope and strength and peace. And you know what? We're all going through battles and we're all going through difficulties. But at the end of the day, we can get up every single day with hope, with strength, put a smile on our face and get out there and be the best version of ourselves and do our very best. So as we approach the end of this podcast, Justin, do you have any final thoughts to say?
That's it.
That's it. So keep Justin in your prayers for that he has a freaking awesome birthday and that he continues to rise and thrive every single day and that his heart and his lungs continue to stay strong and healthy and that God continues to keep his arms wrapped around him. So if you're out there going through any sickness or challenge or difficulty or anything like that, I just pray that God's got his arms on you. Know that he does. And even when it seems like you're not going to get through, you are. And even when you seem like you're in your darkest days, you're not. There's brighter days ahead. So you guys have a fantastic day. Say bye, Justin.
Bye.
Bye, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Hold on.